Risk management is the identification, assessment, and prioritization of risks followed by coordinated and economical application of resources to minimize, monitor, and control the probability and/or impact of unfortunate events or to maximize the realization of opportunities. Risk management's objective is to assure uncertainty does not deflect the endeavor from the business goals. Risks can come from various sources, e.g., uncertainty in financial markets, threats from project failures, legal liabilities, credit risk, accidents, natural causes and disasters, as well as deliberate attack from an adversary, or events of uncertain or unpredictable root cause. There are two types of events, i.e., negative events can be classified as risks while positive events are classified as opportunities. Several risk management standards have been developed, including the Project Management Institute, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, actuarial societies, and ISO standards. Methods, definitions and goals vary widely according to whether the risk management method is in the context of project management, security, engineering, industrial processes, financial portfolios, actuarial assessments, or public health and safety. Risk sources are more often identified and located not only in infrastructural or technological assets and tangible variables, but also in human factor variables, mental states and decision-making. The interaction between human factors and tangible aspects of risk highlights the need to focus closely on human factors as one of the main drivers for risk management. A change driver that comes first of all from the need to know how humans perform in challenging environments and in face of risks. As the author describes, it is an extremely hard task to be able to apply an objective and systematic self-observation, and to make a clear and decisive step from the level of the mere sensation that something is going wrong, to the clear understanding of how, when and where to act. The truth of a problem or risk is often obfuscated by wrong or incomplete analyses, fake targets, perceptual illusions, unclear focusing, altered mental states, and lack of good communication and confrontation of risk management solutions with reliable partners. This makes the human factor aspect of risk management sometimes heavier than its tangible and technological counterparts. Strategies to manage threats typically include avoiding the threat, reducing the negative effect or probability of the threat, transferring all or part of the threat to another party, and even retaining some or all of the potential or actual consequences of a particular threat, and the opposites for opportunities. Certain aspects of many of the risk management standards have come under criticism for having no measurable improvement on risk, whereas the confidence in estimates and decisions seem to increase. For example, it has been shown that 1 in 6 IT projects experience cost overruns of 200% on average, and schedule overruns of 70%. Introduction. Widely used vocabulary for risk management is defined by ISO Guide 73, Risk Management. Vocabulary. In ideal risk management, a prioritization process is followed whereby the risks with the greatest loss and the greatest probability of occurring are handled first, and risks with lower probability of occurrence and low loss are handled in descending order. In practice, the process of assessing overall risk can be difficult, and balancing resources used to mitigate between risks with a high probability of occurrence but lower loss versus a risk with high loss but lower probability of occurrence can often be mishandled. Intangible risk management identifies a new type of a risk that has a 100% probability of occurring but is ignored by the organization due to a lack of identification ability. For example, when deficient knowledge is applied to a situation, a knowledge risk materializes. Relationship risk appears when ineffective collaboration occurs. Process engagement risk may be an issue when ineffective operational procedures are applied. These risks directly reduce the productivity of knowledge workers, decrease cost-effectiveness, profitability, service quality, reputation, brand value, and earnings quality. Intangible risk management allows risk management to create immediate value from the identification and reduction of risks that reduce productivity. Risk management also faces difficulties in allocating resources. This is the idea of opportunity cost. Resources spent on risk management could have been spent on more profitable activities. Again, ideal risk management minimizes spending and also minimizes the negative effects of risks. Method. For the most part, these methods consist of the following elements, performed, more or less, in the following order: identify, characterize threats, assess the vulnerability of critical assets to specific threats, determine the risk, identify ways to reduce those risks, prioritize risk reduction measures based on a strategy. Principles of risk management. The International Organization for Standardization identifies the following principles of risk management. Risk management should create value. Resources expended to mitigate risk should be less than the consequence of inaction, or the gain should exceed the pain. Be an integral part of organizational processes. Be part of decision-making process. Explicitly address uncertainty and assumptions. Be a systematic and structured process. Be based on the best available information. Be tailorable. Take human factors into account. Be transparent and inclusive. Be dynamic, iterative and responsive to change. Be capable of continual improvement and enhancement. Be continually or periodically reassessed. Process. According to the standard ISO 31000 Risk Management Principles and Guidelines on Implementation, the process of risk management consists of several steps as follows. Establishing the context. This involves identification of risk in a selected domain of interest, planning the remainder of the process, mapping out the following: the social scope of risk management, the identity and objectives of stakeholders, the basis upon which risks will be evaluated, constraints, defining a framework for the activity and an agenda for identification, developing an analysis of risks involved in the process, mitigation or solution of risks using available technological, human and organizational resources. Identification. After establishing the context, the next step in the process of managing risk is to identify potential risks. Risks are about events that, when triggered, cause problems or benefits. Hence, risk identification can start with the source of our problems and those of our competitors, or with the problem itself. Source analysis. Risk sources may be internal or external to the system that is the target of risk management. Examples of risk sources are stakeholders of a project, employees of a company, or the weather over an airport. Problem analysis. Risks are related to identified threats. For example, the threat of losing money, the threat of abuse of confidential information, or the threat of human errors, accidents and casualties. The threats may exist with various entities, most important with shareholders, customers and legislative bodies such as the government. When either source or problem is known, the events that a source may trigger or the events that can lead to a problem can be investigated. For example, stakeholders withdrawing during a project may endanger funding of the project. Confidential information may be stolen by employees even within a closed network. Lightning striking an aircraft during takeoff may make all people on board immediate casualties. The chosen method of identifying risks may depend on culture, industry practice and compliance. The identification methods are formed by templates or the development of templates for identifying source, problem or event. Common risk identification methods are objectives-based risk identification. Organizations and project teams have objectives. Any event that may endanger achieving an objective partly or completely is identified as risk. Scenario-based risk identification. In scenario analysis, different scenarios are created. The scenarios may be the alternative ways to achieve an objective, or an analysis of the interaction of forces in, for example, a market or battle. Any event that triggers an undesired scenario alternative is identified as risk. See future studies for methodology used by futurists. Taxonomy-based risk identification. The taxonomy in taxonomy-based risk identification is a breakdown of possible risk sources. Based on the taxonomy and knowledge of best practices, a questionnaire is compiled. The answers to the questions reveal risks. Common risk checking. In several industries, lists with known risks are available. Each risk in the list can be checked for application to a particular situation. Risk charting. This method combines the above approaches by listing resources at risk, threats to those resources, modifying factors which may increase or decrease the risk, and consequences it is wished to avoid. Creating a matrix under these headings enables a variety of approaches. One can begin with resources and consider the threats they are exposed to and the consequences of each. Alternatively, one can start with the threats and examine which resources they would affect. Or one can begin with the consequences and determine which combination of threats and resources would be involved to bring them about. Assessment. Once risks have been identified, they must then be assessed as to their potential severity of impact and to the probability of occurrence. These quantities can be either simple to measure, in the case of the value of a lost building, or impossible to know for sure in the case of the probability of an unlikely event occurring. Therefore, in the assessment process, it is critical to make the best educated decisions in order to properly prioritize the implementation of the risk management plan. Even a short-term positive improvement can have long-term negative impacts. Take the turnpike example. A highway is widened to allow more traffic. More traffic capacity leads to greater development in the areas surrounding the improved traffic capacity. Over time, traffic thereby increases to fill available capacity. Turnpikes thereby need to be expanded in a seemingly endless cycles. There are many other engineering examples where expanded capacity is soon filled by increased demand. Since expansion comes at a cost, the resulting growth could become unsustainable without forecasting and management. The fundamental difficulty in risk assessment is determining the rate of occurrence, since statistical information is not available on all kinds of past incidents. Furthermore, evaluating the severity of the consequences is often quite difficult for intangible assets. Asset valuation is another question that needs to be addressed. Thus, best educated opinions and available statistics are the primary sources of information. Nevertheless, risk assessment should produce such information for the management of the organization that the primary risks are easy to understand and that the risk management decisions may be prioritized. Thus, there have been several theories and attempts to quantify risks. Numerous different risk formulae exist, but perhaps the most widely accepted formula for risk quantification is rate of occurrence multiplied by the impact of the event equals risk magnitude. Composite risk index. The above formula can also be rewritten in terms of a composite risk index, as follows. Composite risk index equals impact of risk event x probability of occurrence. The impact of the risk event is commonly assessed on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 and 5 represent the minimum and maximum possible impact of an occurrence of a risk. However, the 1 to 5 scale can be arbitrary and need not be on a linear scale. The probability of occurrence is likewise commonly assessed on a scale from 1 to 5, where 1 represents a very low probability of the risk event actually occurring while 5 represents a very high probability of occurrence. This axis may be expressed in either mathematical terms or may be expressed in plain English. Again, the 1 to 5 scale can be arbitrary or non-linear depending on decisions by subject matter experts. The Composite Risk Index thus can take values ranging from 1 through 25, and this range is usually arbitrarily divided into 3 sub-ranges. The overall risk assessment is then low, medium or high, depending on the sub-range containing the calculated value of the composite index. For instance, the 3 sub-ranges could be defined as 1 to 8, 9 to 16 and 17 to 25. Note that the probability of risk occurrence is difficult to estimate, since the past data on frequencies are not readily available. As mentioned above, after all, probability does not imply certainty. Likewise, the impact of the risk is not easy to estimate, since it is often difficult to estimate the potential loss in the event of risk occurrence. Further, both the above factors can change in magnitude depending on the adequacy of risk avoidance and prevention measures taken and due to changes in the external business environment. Hence, it is absolutely necessary to periodically reassess risks and intensify, relax mitigation measures, or as necessary, changes in procedures, technology, schedules, budgets, market conditions, political environment, or other factors typically require reassessment of risks.